Welcome to the PA Books podcast. PA Books is a production of PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. This program features interviews with authors of books on Pennsylvania people, history, sports, business, nature, and politics. While the focus is always on Pennsylvania, topics like the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Gettysburg, the Industrial Revolution, the coal and steel industries, and authors like John Updike, David McCullough, and John Grogan have a universal appeal. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
This week on PA Books, Walt Koken, author of Fire on the Mountain.
Walt Koken, author of Fire on the Mountain, An American Odyssey. For people who don't know you or know nothing about the music you play, what music do you play?
I play what we call it old-time music. It's the folk music of our country, really. It's fiddle tunes, dance tunes, and ballads and songs. I play the fiddle and the banjo.
Is it like bluegrass?
Well, bluegrass is a kind of a growth out of old-time music. Yeah, bluegrass is more modern.
How'd you get interested in it?
I heard it. I heard the New Lost City Ramblers. I was playing banjo already, and so yeah, it was a process. It's hard to reconstruct it, but you know, when you hear this stuff, it gets under your skin.
Was banjo your first instrument?
Yeah.
Why banjo?
Well, my brother came home with a guitar one time and showed me some chords, and he said, "Why don't you get a banjo? We'll make some money." I fell for it. I was about 12.
Were there other banjo players who you listened to or wanted to be like?
Well, I got the Pete Seeger book, and of course I got some records of him, and then it just went from there. You know, there was the Kingston Trio. They had banjos. And I saw Flatt and Scruggs on TV. I think it was the Omnibus program on Sunday afternoon, and that was just, fascinating. And so one thing led to another. Yeah, a lot of banjo heroes.
Where were you living at the time?
Syracuse, New York. Yeah.
Were there banjo players around you?
Not that I knew of. No. The only ones that I knew of were on recordings. So, yeah.
Well, before we go too far into it, let's give viewers a chance to get a sample of the kind of music you play.
Okay. Okay, well, I'd like to introduce Claire Milliner, my favorite fiddler, someone who I play with every day.
In one way or the other.
Yeah. And we're going to play a little tune called Sugar in the Gourd, and I may try to sing it, although I have a little cold, so I hate to ruin it. But here it goes. Ready? 1, 2. Sugar in the gourd.
Can't get it out.
So old-time music, when did you start getting, you started banjo when you were about 12 or so, and when did you discover old-time music?
I would have to say, 4 or 5 years later, I got turned on to the New Lost City Ramblers and some of the Folkways records that they had recorded of other people, Wade Ward and Roscoe Holcomb, and then the county label started coming out with reissues of old 78s, which old time music was a pretty big time music business in the 1920s when the early recording industry started. And so there was a huge amount of recordings from those days. Yeah.
Were you at the time kind of an oddity in being interested in this music, or were there other people around you who listened to it?
Fairly odd, but yeah, I met, and of course you meet people who like this kind of music, and we would play together and learn together. So, yeah.
Well, why'd you write your book?
Well, the motivation for the book was, first off, I've had many adventures playing music and traveling and so on, but the main motivation was the Old Time Herald magazine, which is dedicated to old time music. It started back in, I believe, the late 80s, and it had articles about old people who played and old recordings and young people who played and so on like that, and reviews of recordings, re-releases and new releases, and it has gotten a bit played out. So I thought, well, maybe I'll write some little adventures that we had playing in my band back in the 70s, and maybe that would help. So I did. I wrote maybe 15 different short articles, probably 1,500 words, of different adventures that we had on the road, and people liked them. And I always really wanted to write about my adventures, so I just put some more together in this book, which covers from about 1964 to about 1978. So it's a memoir.
How did you remember it all?
How could I forget it? A lot of the things really stand out. Now, some of the details were easy for me to dig up on the internet.
About yourself?
No, about, say, for instance, who was playing at such and such a festival. And I had a short list, but I could go back and look up that year and find out who all was there. So,
you start off the book telling on your 18th birthday, 1964, for a present, your mom gave you a ride to the highway and dropped you off.
Yep.
You had 73 cents in your pocket.
Yep.
And your banjo?
My banjo.
What were you thinking?
Change the clothes. Well, I had already been asked to leave the University of Missouri for a year because of my bad grades, and I couldn't get a job. I was underage. I was underqualified or overqualified. And my mom didn't want me around if I couldn't get a job. And so I waited until I was 18, and I left. And my brother, who we played music together, offered me a place to stay, so I hitchhiked up to his house in Rochester. And that was the beginning of that. I never did go back to school.
You talked about a job in New York with your brother, taking care of lab rats?
Yeah. This fellow, Professor Frank Rosenblatt, was doing experiments in memory. He wanted to know what memory was, what learning was, and so we were training rats So I got to run the Rats.
You played the banjo for the Rats?
I could play the banjo for them, yeah. They never really responded.
Did you find a music, was this Rochester?
No, that was in Ithaca.
Ithaca.
Yeah.
Was there a music scene there that you fell in with?
A little bit, yeah. It was a little bit of a music scene, and there was a fiddle player named George Dorian actually there was a band called the Busted Toe Mudthumpers, and the banjo player was leaving. He was graduating, I believe. So they needed a banjo player. So I fell right in with those guys, and that was fun.
Were you any good?
Oh yeah, the band.
You as a player?
Oh yeah, I was fairly competent and learning all these new old time fiddle tunes on the banjo that were coming out on these reissues, you know, of old 78s. So we had a lot of fun, and George, his folks were from, his mother was from Nova Scotia, and he'd been up to Cape Breton several times and was very into that style of fiddling too, which is real nice, and old time, more Scottish and French.
Did you play around a lot of jobs?
We played around a little bit. We played for the foreign student orientation at Cornell. We played a little bit of this and that. We started playing for square dances on campus, and the caller had never played with a live band. He always used records, so that was fun, and that was a real experience to play for dancers, because that's what that music is all about. Yeah.
What were some of the tunes you played?
We played all the old, Soldier's Joy, Sally Ann, Leather Breeches, on and on and on.
Do you remember what a typical payday was for a job like that?
No, I don't think there was a payday in those days. Occasionally we'd get a job and make 10, 20 bucks. Yeah.
Well, what's the earliest recording of you or your band playing?
Well, George had a tape recorder, a reel-to-reel tape recorder. This is back before the days of cassettes and so on. And so we would make tapes sometimes, and we went to Union Grove one year, and he recorded me playing with John Ray, Lost John Ray. He had this portable tape recorder that had like 12 D-cell batteries in it, and so as he recorded and the batteries wore down, the tape ran slower. So when you play it back at a regular speed, the music sped up. And so there's that. That was back in like 1967 or so, and yeah.
You also got into a New Orleans jazz type band?
Yeah.
Did you have to learn from scratch how to do that?
Well, pretty much, yeah. I knew chords. When I first started playing, I bought books that had chords in them and learned. So I didn't really know that kind of music, but they needed a banjo player for that band too. It was the Muskrat Ramblers, and they were really a good bunch of players. And the leader at the time was Roy Rubenstein, who was a nuclear physicist, and he was from England. And he had a book, a cheat book. It was a little notebook like this, and you look up the tune, it would have the tune name, and it would have the chord / chord / That's all it was. That's all I needed to know. And I did not know that music much at all, but yeah, I picked it up, and sitting there with the piano and a bass and 3 horns, it was easy.
When did you start to fiddle?
Well, George had 2 fiddles, and sometimes he would try to get me to play because I knew the tunes. and to me, it was just a matter of putting it all together, and which I didn't do very well at the time. But then he and another bandmate met their fatal doom in a car accident, and so that was in 1969. And the fall of '69, I borrowed my sister's fiddle and started playing it. So that's when I really started in.
Were you just self-taught?
Yep. Self-taught. I never had a lesson or anything.
You write in the book that you found yourself in the midst of the People's Park riots in Berkeley.
In Berkeley.
In 1969?
Yeah. Yeah, we had started out to go to Alaska to get jobs for the Forest Service up there as a band, and ended up somewhere in Canada deciding, no, we weren't going to go that far. We were just going to go to California. So we had some connections there to play, and we went back there the next year. That was in '68, and then in '69, and the People's Park riots happened. It was terrifying. Yeah.
Was there an old-time music scene there at the time?
Yes, there was. There was another band called the Dr. Humbede's New Tranquility String Band. That was Mac Benford and Sue Draheim, and Eric and Sue Thompson and Will Spires. There was actually quite a few more musicians, some bluegrass, some old time, and I think that scene grew. There's still quite a good old time scene out there now.
And you were with your band then, the Mudthumpers?
The Mudthumpers, yeah. I was, until they've died.
What kept you going with old time music?
Well, just I loved it. I have music in my veins, and I wanted to play it. I wanted to be able to make a living at it. We were good. We had good results with playing for people. So it just kept me up, kept me alive.
What'd you do for money?
Well, we played on the streets. I mean, when I wasn't running rats at the Rat Lab in Ithaca. And yeah, we played on the streets, and then we started to get jobs and play for various people. And somehow we managed to scrape by.
Could you get paying jobs in California?
Yeah, we got jobs there. And of course, after the breakup of the band, the Humbedes band broke up too. So we sort of reformed and started playing with Mac and Bob Potts and some of the other folks out there too. And we would play on campus and pass the hat, or we'd go over to San Francisco and play various places, Fisherman's Wharf or somewhere. And we got gigs. We would go play clubs at night, and yeah, we made some money.
That was enough to keep you going? Just the money you made?
It was, yeah, made us enough to scrape by. And I don't know how we did it, but yeah.
You talk a lot about hitchhiking.
Yeah.
In the book. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it was an earlier day. You don't see many people hitchhiking anymore, but if you only had 73 cents, there's only one way to travel. And I did that. I hitchhiked quite a bit around. It was becoming more and more illegal to hitchhike. I remember somebody saying the governor of Arkansas's son was hitchhiking and got murdered. And so you get this political you get people who were hitchhiking who were maybe a little bit not up and up people. Maybe they're hitchhiking because they're like me, they're broke. Except I didn't have any ulterior motive except just to get from one place to another.
What was the banjo you played at the time?
I had a SS Stewart Thoroughbred that I'd bought for $35 at Onondaga Music in Syracuse.
Made in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, to me at that time, I thought I wanted a master tone, but I had no resources, and master tones cost a lot more than $35. So I never did get one of those.
What kind of banjo do you play today?
It's an Orpheum. I bought that in 1966 in Ithaca.
What do you like about it?
Well, it's the only one I got. Actually, I do have a couple now but I don't really play them. I just play the Orpheum. I like it. It's big. It's got a nice big head and long neck, and it pushes back. I like that. I like a banjo that responds.
Now, for people who do know you, something they might not know about you is that you were into judo pretty seriously for a while.
Yeah, that was a thing that my brother got me into at Cornell, and it was a great discipline, and good athletic things, good training and physical training, and a lot like music in a way, because you had to accomplish a certain technique. You had to learn certain techniques in order to do it. Just like music. I mean, you need to, if you get an idea of a song you want to play, you have to work it out and learn it and put it into your fingers and put it into your head. Same with judo. And so, yeah.
And you write about a trip to Japan where it sounded like when you arrived, nobody knew who you were or didn't expect you.
No, that was, yeah. We were gonna start a new sports club in Ithaca, and my instructor, who was actually the fencing coach at Cornell at the time, it was his dream, I guess. And so we put on some judo demonstrations and raised a little money to send me to Japan. And my dad pitched in, and I did go to Japan to get accredited, to get a ranked, so that I could come back, because the judo instructor in Ithaca was not affiliated with any judo federation organization. So so I went to Japan, and that was a real experience.
Were you accepted there as a judo?
Yeah. I was very respectful of the art, and respectful of the older people, and they liked me, and then I learned a lot. I loved that, but I couldn't stay. It's in the book. I hate to give it all away, but yeah.
Did you have some goal in mind at the time, at that point in your life?
Well, I was. That was right after the band died, and
two band members who were killed in the automatic accident.
Yeah, and so I thought that we were all going to be living in Ithaca, and all have jobs, and my job was going to be working in the sports club as not only a judo instructor, but as a physical education instructor. So, so I went to Japan right after they had their accident, and I thought, well, this is going to be my way of life. But I got over there, and I couldn't play music there. It just was not the right vibe. I was in the wrong place for that, and I missed that. So I left and came back, and eventually started that new band. It was the Fat City String Band at first.
And that's sort of the focus of most of your book, the Fat City String Band and the Highwoods. So before we get into that, let's listen to another tune.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
did the Highwoods Stringband come together?
Well, Mac Benford and Bob Potts and I have started up the Fat City String Band, and
This was in California?
in California, and we our configuration was pretty much that Mac played banjo and Bob and I played fiddles. And Mac can play guitar and I can play banjo and Bob can play, and we did that, and but it never really resolved itself. And we came east and went to some fiddle contests and stuff, and I ended up staying in back in Ithaca and staying with Doug Dorshug and his girlfriend, Jennifer Cleland. And Doug had been a friend of George's back in the day, and Doug, they both played music. So the three of us played together over the winter, and we borrowed a string bass from some friends, and Jenny played that. And Doug, of course, again, he can play guitar, he can play banjo, he can play anything, piano. Doug's a great musician. And so, but then in the spring, Mac had moved to Maryland. So he came up for a visit, and we decided, well, let's go down to Union Grove Fiddlers Convention at Easter time. And so we got Bob to come out from California. So there's the five of us, 2 fiddles, banjo, guitar, and a bass. And it just was dynamite. It worked just like falling off a log. And we knew a lot of the music, the same music. It was easy to work things out, and we started playing. We called ourselves the Fat City String Band, and our friends Ken and Marion from Rounder Records they started Rounder Records. They said, anytime you want to do a record, let us know. So we did some recording, and it was at that time that our friends at the Smithsonian Institution told us that there was another band with that name, Fat City. They called themselves Fat City, who were a backup band for a popular singer at the time. And so
John Denver.
Yeah, John Denver. And they advised us to change our name before we released our album. So we did, and we called ourselves the Highwoods Stringband. Mostly from Charlie Poole's song. It was the Coot from Tennessee, and he says, the chorus goes, I'm gonna live, we always thought it was, I'm gonna live in the Highwoods till I die. Most people think it's, I'm gonna live anyhow until I die. But Charlie Poole had gotten shot, through the mouth. And so it was very hard to understand a lot of the things that he sang. So we always called it Highwoods.
You recorded your album outdoors?
Yeah. Yep. And it was long playing, short selling. But it helped. We sold a few.
Did you make money off your album?
Not very much. It wasn't very much then. We were able to I think buy them from Rounder for $2 and sell them for $4. I think albums went for $4 in those days, and the ones that they sold, I think we got 10 cents for the band. So it was not a lot of profit, but they were good advertising. And so, yeah.
I want to ask you about Jenny Cleland. She played the bass in the band. Was it unusual at the time to have a bass and a woman bass player in an old-time band?
Yeah. When we went to fiddle contests, fiddlers conventions, there were a lot. Most of the bluegrass bands had a string bass, and in fact, in the early days, the fiddlers who entered the contest were usually backed up by a bluegrass band, even though they were playing old time music. So it was easy for us to just fall into that and get Jenny to play bass. It was a big sound, 2 fiddles, guitar and banjo, and I have to say that in those days there weren't that many women playing old time music. There were some, but not like today, where they're well represented in the old time community.
What was life like in the Highwoods Stringband?
Well, we traveled quite a bit. We got in our trucks and and drove here and there and got gigs, college concerts and festivals and coffee houses and various places, and it wasn't easy. It's hard work doing that, and traveling and then still trying to be lively and entertaining.
You all traveled in the same vehicle?
Well, when we first started, both Mac and I had old Ford panel trucks from the early 50s, and they fell by the wayside, and we collectively bought a window van and fitted it out with a bed with at window height with a foam mattress that you could put all the instruments underneath it, and it had 2 seats in front and then a bucket and then a bench seat for 3 people. So yeah, we put a lot of miles on that. In fact, we wore one out and bought another one. Yeah.
Do you remember some performance you had where you felt like everything was clicking, like we were really on tonight and like we're on our way?
Yeah, there were a lot of times like that. When we were at Union Grove there in 1972, that first time, they had a tent that must have held 10,000 people in it. It was huge, and we got that place rocking. And we thought we had something. We did.
Do you remember the biggest bust of jobs, like where you drove the longest distance to have the biggest disappointment when you got there?
No. I can't really pull up anything like that. I mean, there was a lot of ups and a lot of downs.
You did write about trying to get into Canada to a big festival there.
Yeah, we got in trouble at the border there. Somebody had given a person in the band a little aspirin tin full of marijuana seeds and said, "Here, plant these." Of course, that was part of the culture at the time, and they never got planted. They got planted in somebody's medicine cabinet. And when we went to go to the Mariposa Festival near Toronto, Canada, they got thrown in somebody's bag, and they found those at the border, and they turned us away. It was very disappointing, but oh well.
Well, you write in here that the best year we had in the band, our individual net incomes were about $4,800.
Yeah, yep. Not much. I mean, we worked full time. Well, full time. We were on the road probably half the days of the year, and I think we grossed about $50,000, which isn't too bad. But we had to spend about half of it on travel, and then we split up the rest, and that's what it amounted to. And it was, I think the poverty level at that time was around $20,000. So we were really scraping by.
How did you decide what your repertoire was? I mean, who would bring tunes in, and who would decide, yeah, we'll do that, no, we won't do that?
Well, some of it was brought, for instance, by me from the Mudthumpers. Some of it was brought by Mac from his band, and by Bob from his band. and some of it. Now Mac had a tape collection that was all the old 78s. It was a wall full of tapes, and after the band started rolling, Doug and Jenny had that at their house, and they learned lots of stuff from that, songs, Carter Family, all kinds of stuff. So everybody input, and we all just loved playing, and we would early on we would have band practice all the time, and just work on new stuff and play old stuff and have fun.
Tell me about the trip to South America.
Well, we played at the National Folk Festival at Wolf Trap Farm Park down by Washington, D.C. And the fellow that ran that was Andy Wallace. And he put together this tour of Latin America for the State Department. And so it was 26 people who played at the National Folk Festival, and then we all flew down and spent 6 weeks traveling through Central and South America. And that was quite an experience, and quite hard work too. I think we had 6 days off during those 6 weeks.
How was your music received in South America?
Pretty good, depended from place to place. One of the things we did, there was a Cajun band. It was D.L. Menard and the Louisiana Aces. It was Marc Savoie and Lionel Leloup on the fiddle and accordion. And D.L., they called him the Cajun Hank Williams. And he loved to sing. He could sing Hank Williams songs, and he wrote a lot of stuff himself too. And he liked to do the Hank Williams song down there because Hank Williams was popular, and they knew those songs, and they liked that. So but he couldn't get Mark and Lionel to really do them the way he liked, so he got us to back him up on one tune during the show in the evening. And so we did that down in Viña del Mar in Chile, and they went crazy. It was this auditorium. They just loved it so much. They started clapping for an encore and started stamping their feet. And it sounded like the place was going to come down. It was very scary. So we had to go back up and appease them, and do another one. It was a little out of the ordinary. But
You talked earlier in this interview about your heroes and your musical heroes, and one of them you talked about was Tommy Jarrell, who you got to meet, and he had heard of you.
Yeah. Well, when Mac and Bob and I went east, we played at the Marion, Virginia Fiddlers Convention, and we swept that. We won the band, we won the fiddles, we won the banjo, and so we traveled around a little bit, and then we went and visited Tommy, and he had already heard about us from somebody that he was friends with who was there. So he had heard about us, and he was pretty welcoming. A lot of people went and visited Tommy. I think he had a sign on the door or something like "First night is free, second night is $100." I don't know, I can't remember, but yeah.
Was there a time with the Highwoods that you started to think, we're not going to get famous?
Well, we had a certain amount of fame, but it wasn't paying off, and so after a while it started to wear thin. The enthusiasm for getting together wasn't there. Doug and Jenny, actually both of them moved to Tennessee. They wanted to be closer down to the music, and the winters in Ithaca were getting long and slushy. So there was a sort of a falling apart gradual, you know.
Oh, well, let me back up a minute. And can you tell about the Carnegie Hall concert?
Well, that was the New Lost City Ramblers' 20th anniversary, and they asked us to play there. And so we played, and they had Elizabeth Cotten and Pete Seeger and us. It was a nice show. We got to play right in Carnegie Hall, you know.
Did you get paid for it?
A little. They paid our expenses, you know, like we asked the taxi driver how to get to Carnegie Hall, and he said, practice, practice, practice.
How did you end up in Pennsylvania?
I fell in love with Claire Milliner, and yep, that was it. Great fiddler.
And you gave up music for 10 years?
Yeah, well, it was probably longer than that. It was, I think the Highwoods broke up in '78, and I didn't play again until around '91.
Why did you go all that time without playing?
Well, the band, you know, things got worse and worse with the band, and it finally got to a point where playing, instead of being the joy that it once was, just reminded me of the hard times we had traveling and you know, and trying to make a living at something that was not working. So I quit.
How'd you make a living after that?
I did carpentry. I did carpentry for as long as I could, and then when things started hurting, I took the civil service exam and started working as a rural carrier for the post office.
What got you back to music?
I just couldn't stay away. Actually, my friend Marty Levinson, who was in the Busted Toe Mudthumpers, he used to come visit up from New York City, and he saw I had a banjo that was hanging on the wall that had a broken head. So he brought me a head, and I mounted it on there just to make it look better. And of course, I tried to play it then, and it was a little fretless. And you know, I get a little frustrated with fretless because there's only so much you can do with that. So I got out the old Orpheum and started playing that, and pretty soon I was just back playing.
What band are you in now?
Well, we have the Orpheus Supertones, named after the two banjos that are in the band. My banjo is the Orpheum, and Pete Peterson's banjo is the Supertone, which was a Sears Roebuck label, I believe, back in the 1920s. And his banjo actually supposedly was one of Charlie Poole's banjos. Did you know that?
I had heard that, yeah.
Uh-huh.
How often do you play?
Well, we've been going at it since 2003, so it's been, 15 years, and we actually play less and less and less. We've been together longer than Highwoods was. But we like to have what we call band practice in the middle of the week. We get together at one or the other houses, and we eat and drink and play music. And so, yeah, there's that.
Are there Highwoods or Orpheus Supertone recordings available?
Oh, yes. There's Highwoods had made 3 LPs for Rounder, and then I guess back in the 90s they did a compilation of the 3 on a CD. So there's that, and then of course we got together with Pete and Kelly for the Orpheus Supertones, and we've made 3 CDs with them.
What is the state of old-time music now?
Well, I think it's thriving. It's doing pretty good. It's a much bigger scene than there was back when we started back in the 60s and 70s, and it's a different feeling. I always say, back in those days, you get an old time band or even a bluegrass band, and you'd go to a fiddler's convention, and they'd get in a circle out in the field, and people would gather around them, and they'd play and play and play and play. And nowadays, people put up their canopies and bring lots of chairs, and you get a group of people, sometimes 20 people playing at once. It's a different kind of scene. It's more communal, it's more congenial, I think, and so it's kind of nice.
Why isn't it more commercially successful?
Why is what?
Old-time music.
Why isn't it?
Why isn't it? Yeah.
For the one thing is that the music is in the public domain, and so commercially it's not viable. There are no royalties for that. Nobody wrote it that you know of, and so there's no commercial incentive to promote it, including our government. See, the government sets up copyright laws to promote creativity. And so even though you have to be very creative to play old-time music, there are no royalties. So, the bluegrass band that writes their own music, they make money. They get royalties. When they record it, if somebody else records it, they get a royalty for that. Whenever they get played on the radio, they get a royalty for that. But old-time music, nothing.
The tunes are traditional?
Traditional, public domain.
No one knows who wrote them?
No. Or if they know who wrote them, it never was claimed, Yeah.
If people watch this and they want to know more about old-time music, where do they find it? Where can they find old-time music played or listen to it?
Well, there's a whole world of recordings of old-time music, new and old. And I guess you could find it on the web. We have a Mudthumper.com is a website where our stuff is, including the books and everything. But I don't know if there's one place you could find it. Just Google old-time music.
We have been talking with Walt Koken. He is the author of this book, Fire on the Mountain, An American Odyssey. And before we finish, let's listen to one more tune.
And here's an old tune called The Falls of Richmond. Hey?
I'm ready.
1, 2, 3.
You've been listening to a podcast of PA Books, a production of PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. We'd like to hear from you. Our email address is pabooks@pcntv.com. Like us on Facebook to learn more about PA Books.